What's up, everybody? Ryan Turford, the man on the moose here, and welcome to Saints Row in Review.
No power greater than X.
So the story of Saints Row is, twofold. Either I think that there's some really fun open world gameplay on display here, but on the other hand, there's a lot of bugs and glitches that kind of prevent you from having fun with this game. So depending on how much, bugs and glitches really affect your enjoyment of a game, this game may or may not be for you, but I'm excited to tell you about it nonetheless. Story-wise, the Saints Row games have never been known for, amazing stories or anything like that. And this one's no different. I mean, the story's fine. You're basically a character of your own creation, hanging out with three of your roommates, Eli, Kevin, and Neha. Basically, Neha and Kevin are working for rival gangs, and then you're working for a security company. But after you get fired, and likewise with Kevin and Neha, they don't really like how things are progressing with their individual gangs. You all decide, hey, we're going to work for ourselves and we're going to form the Saints, in the most cheesy way possible by being like, oh, there's a church available. Let's use that as our hideout. And oh, look, the Saints logo is on the ground and there's a picture of a Saints. We're going to call ourselves the Saints. It's very cheesy and kind of convoluted. And likewise, there's a lot of predictable moments throughout the story. There's some twists and turns, but the twists and turns you can see a mile ahead of time. So none of that too, but I just didn't really buy. I bought these characters really cared about each other, that Neha, Kevin, and Eli, and your main character kind of had some kind of repertoire between each other, and they had this family vibe to them, which is what they were really going for. But I just never personally cared about any of the characters at all. The Eli in particular, I think, was probably the one I liked the most because he does have this great, storyline that's separate from the rest of the characters that I really liked. And it's one of my favorite set of missions that you'll do in this entire game. But for the most part, the story's fine, it exists. It kind of is just there to kind of get you from one place to the other. So I wouldn't really come into this game looking for a good story or anything like that. However, the one part of Saints Row that I actually liked the most and had to be actually coming back for more with this game was the combat loop. Even though the gun controls felt a little bit floaty and the enemies could be a little bit dumb sometimes, you don't really have, it's not a cover shooter or anything like that. So even though you can duck behind the cover, for the most part, even though I played it on normal difficulty, I felt like I could just run around and shoot guys and they would shoot me. And I just had a fun time with the combat. It's kind of just dumb fun, but I just really enjoyed the combat. Yes, you don't really have a lot of the goofy weapons from the previous Saints Row games because they tried to, in tone, make this, more serious and I think closer to either the first Saints Row or even a little bit of Saints Row the third kind of mixed in there. But I did like, the combat a lot. I like the gunplay. I like the guns that you have there at your disposal. And you do get some more goofy stuff towards the end of the game that I'm not going to spoil, that do feel more like they're ripped out of some kind of crazy sci-fi game or something like that. But I mean, you're not swinging around the dildo bat in this game or anything like that. So it is very different as far as, the gun selection from previous games, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I actually don't mind that they went a little more grounded with both the story and the gunplay, but I know it's a turnoff for some people, especially for fans of Saints Row especially if you like the fourth game, for example, that was in outer space and you had superpowers and stuff. So very different feeling from the previous Saints Row game, but I personally didn't think that the combat was any worse for that. Not only that too, but I think there's a lot to do in the open world of Saints Row. If you're the type of person that misses the old school kind of open world design of having different regions that you need to liberate because each region has a specific set of objectives in it. And then as you kind of, tick them off the map, it then, fills in your checklist, which then, claims the territory for the Saints. And there's a bunch of different territories on the map itself. It seems it starts off kind of slow as on the open world front. It doesn't seem like there's a lot to do there, but as you start, putting money into criminal ventures, which allow you to build a specific building that allows the Saints to generate income. It replaces, buying buildings from the previous Saints Row games. And I like that it's a little more tailored into, hey, how do you want to, customize the city with a little bit of base building in between there. And each of those criminal ventures also has like a quest line associated with it too, with its own set of objectives across the map, as well as, when you populate a new one, you'd also get 5, resistance camps that you got to take out as well. So there's a lot to do on the open world, and there's a lot of things that really kept me coming back for more as far as the open world design. I kind of liked how there was just so much to do. I just felt like almost like there was too much to do in the open world. But otherwise, as far as how long it takes this to beat the story, for me, it took me about 14 hours to finish the main campaign. And I think you could actually probably beat it a little bit quicker if you don't focus on some of the open world stuff. I did about 50% of the open world stuff before completing the campaign. And then once you're done the campaign, you could actually continue to go throughout the city. And there's actually more stuff for you to do that unlocks after you finish the campaign. So there's actually more to do in the city in case you wanted more to it. But I love, some of the side gigs that you do, whether it's, car races or insurance fraud minigame from previous Saints Row games, or even I like the Wanted app a lot, which was because, of course, the menu in this game is an app section of your phone. And the Wanted app's pretty cool because it gives you a bunch of bounties to track down, and each of the stories is very quick and concise. But I just like that element where you have to go to a dead drop and it explains, and each one felt very different from each other as well, which is something I really liked about it. So yeah, I think there's a lot to do in this open world, and I think there's a lot of good things to say about it. And it just, again, it feels very old school. So if you're into, the older Saints Row games, or, if you like the open world design of something like Infamous, for example, I think you'll really like the open world here. However, you've probably noticed I said a lot of positive things in this review. And unfortunately, this is kind of where things kind of, start to go downhill a little bit, because we got to talk about the visuals. So I played the game both on Xbox Series X as well as Xbox Series S, because I wanted to try out both versions, see if there was any differences. And with the Series X, I think you actually get like a multitude of great options, because you got 5 different graphical options, depending on if you want to play it at 1080p with like ultra max settings, and it still runs at like a fairly smooth frame rate, or if you want to go all the way up to 4K at 30 frames per second, or if you want to play at 1440p at like 60 frames per second, which is what I did. In fact, I think 1440p at high frame rate is probably the option that I would actually recommend. It was the one that I had the best results at. Whereas Series S, very lacking. You don't get any options. It gives you a kind of like a very ugly looking 30 frames per second. It just doesn't really look good at 1080p. And unfortunately, like, we've seen a lot of great Xbox Series S ports of games or versions of games that run on Series S with a lot of either options, or even if they don't have options, usually they pick like the really good 1080p option and they just go with that. But unfortunately, I don't know what happened here with this one as far as, the different graphical options, because they're not very good, combined with the fact too that even though I like the stylistic look of the city itself that you're exploring, like I like the cityscapes themselves, I like the casino. Like, it just feels like very Las Vegas-y, but also you've got the desert that's sort of kind of plain, but it's the desert. How much do you really expect them to do with it? I do think there's some interesting landmarks you can actually see in the open world, but beyond that, visually, like, there's a lot of pop-in even on Series X. Even when you're just like, if you've got like a helicopter or a jet and you're flying over an area, like, it's popping in like as you're flying over it, and it just looks kind of muddy. It also kind of looks like the background is just very out of focus, and the draw distance isn't very far in this game, and it doesn't really have like a great look to it. I think the characters look fine. I definitely think that the characters themselves don't look terrible, and I definitely think they're a step up from previous Saints Row games, but the environments themselves, like, again, I like the look they were going for. I just wish it was better implemented. And then the one thing I got to talk about the most are the bugs and glitches. And I noticed, after receiving the game on Monday from last week, because we did receive a code, full disclosure, from our friends over at Deep Silver. After receiving the code, I noticed from the time I played it, from start to finish, there were a couple patches that came out, and I did notice there were the bugs got, better and better as we went. And actually, like, for the first half of the experience, I didn't really run into any issues playing the game or any, weird bugs and glitches. It wasn't really until like the back half of the campaign that I noticed the biggest problem from, problems such as, loading apps in your on your phone that then would cause the game to crash or cause the game to freeze or not allow you to do anything, to, when you're customizing your character in the style menu. And then I go to, try on a different hat or something for my character. And instead of displaying the name of the hat, it displays like the asset name with like the asset file tag on it, which then totally causes the game to break, to, people flying through the air or people just swimming while they're running around on, like they're walking around on the street, or people falling through the environment. There's a lot of, bugs and glitches with this game. It was definitely, I don't know if it was rushed out, but it was definitely not as polished as you would hope anyways. But again, for the first half of the game, I was actually really high on it. I didn't know where a lot of this stuff was going to come in because, I'd heard obviously word of mouth, but I tried to, mute as much of that as I could. But, it wasn't really until the last half of the experience where I got to like the middle section of missions towards the end, it just became worse and worse and worse. And it became harder to play. And I had more, bugs and glitches that really affected the gameplay in a meaningful way. So overall, how do I feel about Saints Row? Well, as you can tell, like I said, throughout this review, you've probably heard my ups and downs with the game. Again, I do think there's a good game in here. Yes, I know that it's a very different game from the other Saints Row games, and it's not in the same style. But at the same time, I do think there are good elements here. I do like the open world. I like the combat loop. And I didn't really hate any of the new characters. I just wish that, I would care about them a little bit more. But it's just one of those things where honestly, I really was let down both by the bugs and glitches and the story. I did like, as I mentioned before, I did like the idea of them, going back to basics with it and not making it as goofy. Like, even though I know a lot of Saints Row fans were sad that we were missing a lot of our favorite characters or that it wasn't over the top and zany, I'm okay with that as long as the game is still fun. And I do think there is a lot of fun with this game, but the bugs really hamper my enjoyment of this game. And it makes it tough to recommend day one. At the same time, at some point when a lot of the bugs and fixes, I assume, get fixed, because it sounds like there's going to be a long plan after launch for Saints Row with a bunch of different content from the season pass coming. So I do think that there's a good chance that a lot of the bugs and issues that I'm talking about in this review have been fixed, in the next, 6 to 8 months, hopefully. And plus the game will probably be on sale then. Maybe it'll come to Game Pass. So I definitely think at that point, when it goes on sale and it becomes cheaper either during, Black Friday or over the holidays, I think this is actually a game worth checking out, that is worth your time when all this stuff gets cleared up and fixed, and definitely not at full price. But I do think you get, a full retail price game here with the open world, with a lot of stuff to do in it. I just wish that it was a cleaner launch for the game, because I really do think people would like this game a lot more than they clearly do now. But personally, I had fun with this game. Like, I enjoyed the combat loop. I enjoyed the gameplay loop of this game. And honestly, like, I had a really good time with Saints Row, despite all of the issues with it. But I definitely think, like I said, it's a harder recommend for day one. But I do think it's definitely worth a game worth playing at some point. So that's going to do it for my review of Saints Row. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this game, or if you have any questions for me, because I can definitely answer them for you. Let me know in the comments below. You can also hit me up on Twitter anytime at Ryan Turford. You can find us on Twitter at Carpool Gaming, on YouTube at youtube.com/carpoolgaming, on podcast services around the globe. So this has been my review of Saints Row. I'm Ryan Turford, and I'm out.